difficulty with moving as quickly as the startups who they do business with. So we've got a number of people from startups here to really tell us about what growth hacking is, why it's important, and how you can make your organization move more quickly. So panelists, come on up. I feel like it's the dating game or something, especially the director's chairs. Okay, here they come in alphabetical order. Oh, okay. So yeah, just come around there. Joe, you go here, and then, in that direction. Switching mics here. Okay, we're the last panel, so we got to mix it up. We're going to throw chairs, have big arguments and all this. So for those of you who don't know me, which you're probably all sick of me by this point, I'm Kathy Taylor. I'm the social media insider for MediaPost and frequent MC and moderator. So with that, I'm just going to ask each of you to briefly say who you are and what your company does, because you all have all these cool .com names, and I think you all need to briefly explain what the hell it is you do.
Hi, I'm Joe Burton. I'm the president of Social Chorus. We have a social word-of-mouth marketing platform.
I'm Bob Gilberth. I'm a co-founder and president of PinGauge, which is a Pinterest marketing optimization company.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Sethi, the CEO and founder of Adaptly. We're a media buying technology for social.
My name is Jason Stein. I'm the founder and president of Laundry Service, a social media agency, and also a venture capital firm called Windforce Ventures.
And I'm Philip Von Boris. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Fine29. We're a lifestyle destination that delivers 24/7 inspiration to lead a more stylish and creative life.
Okay, so now, lightning round. Define growth hacking. Yeah, you can go in order on this one. Later on I'm going to. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the sort of the textbook definition is scalable, repeatable growth driven by product, data, and marketing. Within our company, growth hacking specifically is finding the advocates who matter most and having them tell your brand story.
I don't really like growth hacking as a term, but I'm going to define it. I think it's just maybe a sexier way to describe what I feel like marketing has always been about. I started my career in marketing at Procter & Gamble, and the first thing I learned is your job is to figure out how people work, what they need, and how to create products and marketing that helps deliver that need. That's growth hacking. It's figuring out how to hack into people's minds by getting it, and preferably using that data and knowledge for good, by the way. But that's really what it's about. Marketing has always been about that, of understanding what people, how they work, and doing something different. I think by using the word growth hacking today, maybe marketing feels too much like advertising or old school. But I feel like that's what we're doing really every day. It's still with new businesses, with a startup mentality, figuring out how do we hack into people's brains, deliver something of value, whether it's to consumers or back to marketers themselves, like what we do.
Yeah, for me, simply, even at a more abstract level outside of marketing, growth hacking just really means getting shit done, and getting shit done without worrying about any of the existing protocols or rules that are in place, and achieving some high-level objective in its most ideal sort of form.
I think that was a pretty perfect definition, especially because you cursed twice during it. Kathy loves that. I think success on social media is really a commitment to change. So I would say growth hacking in a lot of ways is a commitment to change every day, being able to be the first ones to try something new and benefit disproportionately from people who arrive late to something that's new and unique and different. And whether it's something like Instagram and being one of the early people to get on there and amassing a huge number of followers, or trying a new Facebook ad tactic before everyone else is and getting lower CPMs, being able to move quickly is really the key in this age, and I think that's what growth hacking means.
And I'm going to out myself and say that I didn't even know what growth hacking was until last week.
Well, welcome to the panel. They said you'd be,
and then I looked it up and I was
good.
like, okay, that's just like how we've done business for the last several years. That's how you grow. That's how you grow a new product. You do it with product in mind. You do it with technology. You do it with analytics, and with a great degree of creativity. So it's essentially non-traditional ways of growing a product.
Well, one thing I think a lot of you have, defined this in terms of marketing, but is this really, a broader concept? I mean, there's so many ways that moving more quickly and being more innovative. I mean, it's not just about, you could be fast and really stupid, right? But so what's sort of the broader, kind of, I don't want to say definition because we just did that, but what's kind of the broader thing that growth hacking is about? Because it's not just about, sort of the real-time newsroom thing. In this crowd, a lot of people will, immediately move to fast marketing, and that's not really what it's necessarily about.
I don't know, I have a quick, just maybe, because our company revolves so much in the world of fashion and fashion brands, and clearly over the last several years, you've seen many of them enter the world of e-commerce, where all of a sudden they had to tackle a completely new challenge, a digital challenge. And I'm talking about many brands who might actually be at sort of the longer tail of the funnel, emerging brands. They're trying to tackle something that have built a really great real-world product, and actually have done that well with great marketing and street cred. But when it comes to actually getting their digital product off the ground, the needle just doesn't move. And so where I think what growth hacking means to me is really the sort of very creative integration of an understanding of product, of analytics, of testing, and of course of technology to really figure out how do you accelerate something dramatically, to grow dramatically in the digital sphere.
So,
yeah, and for me, simply, as organizations scale, as the brands get bigger, as we get bigger, we all suffer from sort of, again, these, self-imposed processes and restrictions, and that prevents a lot of the innovation that we're trying to achieve, right? And, I think that growth hacking is something that applies, again, to any size organization, but, there's a lot of questions also in terms of, outside of marketing as well, just in growing a business, how do you start to, again, approach the problem from its ideal end conclusion, right? And go around or against whatever red tape or bureaucracy or whatever the issue is to achieve the ultimate goal, whether it's ROI from a marketing standpoint or just building the best organization.
So, well, question. I'll start this question with Bob because Bob worked at P&G, and I'm thinking startup here, huge brand, huge company over there. I mean, but it's really for all of you guys. What is it like? What does it take to kind of bring, in a sense, some of your culture over to companies that may really have the intent to move more quickly, but may not have the corporate will to really move quickly. So
yeah, I think that's and between starting this new company, Pingage, and leaving Procter & Gamble, I was 7 years on the digital agency side as well, and grew a business and sold it to WPP. So I've spent time with, I think, almost 80% of the Fortune 500, and they have the same type of challenges again and again. So what I found is you've got to make it easy for them. And that hacking is, it goes back to habit formation and habit change. You can't get people to change their habits overnight. So the only chance we have is to try to nudge them from current habits. And I think that's what we try to do with our business is say, okay, Pinterest is a huge opportunity, but how do we create a company that helps them nudge? And so we've done things like, our number one goal is make their life easier. So we're not saying, here's some software, you use it and A/B test pins. We're saying, we're going to do that work for you. Because if we tell them to go log into the 16th interface and do A/B testing, they're never going to get it done. So it's also things like pay for performance. We're saying, gosh, we know they have a big media budget and they hate paying monthly fees for things. So, okay, we're going to build a business that's based on getting results out of the media budget. So the cool thing about that is, again, it almost goes back to the product. We developed a product that almost markets itself because it fits in with what the current habits are for marketers. So I think that's the key, is by just saying, hey, everyone should go do something. They're not going to do it. How do you baby step them along?
Yeah. Anyone else on that? It wasn't just a question for him, but I just love the P&G thing. So anyway, Jason.
Well, from the agency point of view, I think it comes down to two things for us. One is to be upfront at the very beginning about what is going to be required for success across the programs, whether it's social communications on the corporate level or B2B or digital PR or whatever you're trying to do is to make it very clear up front so that then when there's an opportunity for us to move on, we actually just do it. You actually have to do it. You can't go back to the brand and say, hey, why don't we try this? Here's a brief. Can you run it up the flagpole? We actually just do it, and we tell them ahead of time that that's what we have to do to succeed. And I'd rather have a conversation 2 weeks later about why it worked or what the learnings were and what could be better next time than talk about, well, why didn't we do this or why haven't we done anything lately, which is a conversation brands have a lot with agencies. And I guess when you're more of a traditional ad agency, you tend to get it in those situations. But on the social media side, we can come in and say, hey, you guys aren't doing this right or you don't know what you're doing. And if you want us to do this right, you have to be willing to do it a certain way.
Yeah, Joe?
I think I like the way Bob described it in sort of baby steps. A lot of startups hate when they hear we'll do a test, and it actually doesn't bother us at all because tests tend to lend themselves to growth hacking. You have a small team on the client side. You don't have 15 or 20 people in the room who are wanting to learn, wanting to slow the process down, wanting to take credit, et cetera. Usually have 2 or 3 clients or customers you're dealing with who want to do things rapidly and actually test and learn, right? If you have a large group, what we find is it turns into test and burn, which is no one owns it. Okay, we tried it. It wasn't the magic bullet. Let's move on to something else. But the small test group are perfect for introducing the right culture.
And if I were to say that just quickly one other way, baby steps, testing, really, that's invoking or porting, from the PNG to the startup work counter is sort of, migrating this culture or willingness to accept failure, right? And, the idea that, if we test something and it doesn't work doesn't mean that we made a mistake, right? I think that's an important piece of growth hacking as well. If you think about this iterative model, right, where many or maybe 99% of the cases are not going to be successful, right?
Well, how do you sort of prepare everybody for failure? That this is a very common part of like the Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley culture. Like failure's kind of fine, right? But I'm going to go back to a baby metaphor again. It's like throwing, but there's a lot of throwing out the baby with the bathwater that goes on when oh, it didn't hit the first time. So how do you kind of change that mindset on behalf of big brands? You ready, Jason? Go.
I really, again, think it comes down to just communicating it up front and then doing it. And over a month period, because things move so fast in our world, you can fail twice and then succeed 6 times, right? And before that next meeting with the brand, you've already done so many things that you've succeeded. And I think if you've really committed to change and to growth hacking, you've gone through that cycle so many times between the standard reporting that, I mean, a lot of times we're just showing a huge success at the end of the month, right? At the end of the day, we won by failing several times and then winning several times more than that. And I think that's part of just doing it. And the client, I guess, because they're not as savvy in what we do, doesn't know every little thing that's happened. And that's just part of how you have to growth hack along the way, I think.
It sounds like you're really stealth. Anyway, someone else want to take that one question?
Say one thing that's fun is almost framing it as, hey, let's go test this just so you can stop talking about it for the next 2 years. Let's go out and fail so we can just get some data on the plate, and then, hey, if it's a waste of time, let's not spend endless planning meetings and navel gazings about it. Let's just get it done and move to the next thing, in 3 months instead of 3 years.
One of the things we do to prepare clients as well is bring a balanced conversation. So everyone wants to see like case studies. Like, what was your best case study? Who really crushed it, right? And when we share that, we also share the level of commitment, right? Because there's sort of your worst case study to your best case study, and the level of commitment on the big brand side is usually very different, right? So growth hacking is about the iteration, getting into the data. What does it mean? How do we optimize? How do we change the messaging, the offer, et cetera? And if you're willing to play along, you can expect to get the great results. If not, here's our worst case study.
I think that sort of early on conversation around failure with a brand and is actually just a great. It offers a great degree of credibility for yourself because you actually know what you're speaking about. To us, when we work with brands as a media company, as sort of a next generation media company, our business is really to sort of growth hack for cool with other brands in terms of content marketing that we create, and And because the process is so fluid, actually, and oftentimes it'll include, from one day to the next, you'll see sort of a new iteration of of an original piece of content that could have gone up, and you'll see the change so dramatically happen almost in real time that there is this great satisfaction actually feeding off that.
Well, yeah, so Jason, were you going to say?
That's the beauty of the internet. You find out right away what's working and what's not working. So you can create a piece of content and it performs okay on your Facebook page, and then you see what would have been better because someone says, hey, this sucks, here's why. The next thing you should address that directly, and then you see, oh, this worked well, let's do more of this and target to more people who like this type of content. And you just, again, it's not failing, it's just learning. It's doing your job and learning and getting better at it.
Right. Well, I'd love for you guys to share some examples of, growth hacking that you think has worked. I think on the call, someone brought up like Chobani, but any examples you have that are kind of concrete, either from your own, platform, your own experience, or things that you've just stood there and said, I wish I did that.
So I was thinking of some examples as I was walking over here, and I realized that a lot of, brands actually being able to control their own destiny has a lot to do actually with finding meaning these days. Actually being able to establish meaning in your own brand. And one brand that has just consistently just knocks it out of the park is Red Bull. It's because they've found out a way that the meaning of the brand transcends the product. Right? And so I find that is just one of the most interesting examples to me in terms of brands hacking away at actually defining the meaning of their brand because it's that much larger than just a product in and of itself.
Yeah, Joe?
I think for us, our largest client is Intel, and I find a lot of the large tech companies tend to be early adopters, and they tend to think about the iterative process because that's their company culture. But they started working with us by asking others to create content around the brand. And they did it in a very smart way, which is professional publishers, how does technology make life better, right? And you had publishers from automotive design to hip-hop music to architecture, you name it, raising their hand saying, I want to play, because they're telling their story and how technology makes life better. They liked that so much and they had such success with that we started doing that with sort of mid-tier publishers, where here's content, you can distribute it and then add to it. And now they're also running employee-based programs. So how does technology fuel your passions as an employee? So you talk about growth hacking, they're hitting different verticals with similar success, optimizing, creating hundreds of assets, 500,000 conversations around the brand last year. And never once do we have a conversation around CPM, right? And so they're just been an absolute pleasure to work with.
I'd love to share, our first client is a little content company called Skinny Mom that shares content around for moms kind of bouncing back from having a baby. And they're now getting 65,000 unique visitors per day through Pinterest by creating content for the Pinterest audience. So they said, what can we do? We can hack into this new platform and do it better than anyone else in the world. And I've talked to Meredith, Hearst, Time Inc., Better Homes and Gardens, places that have bigger brand names by far, bigger followings, and they're not seeing those kinds of numbers. And the reason is because you've got this hungry startup that says, this is all I've got to do, and she's literally got to put food on the table for her family. And I think that's where the innovation comes. I think the biggest brands, back to my Procter days, is when I launched Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, we had no budget. We didn't know if this thing would do well at all. We had about $1 million, and we said, let's do some sampling. And the word of mouth is what built that up to be a huge success by just getting it out there and let people talk about a great product. So I think that's where the biggest innovation comes. When you don't have the budget, when you don't have the resources, you've got to literally get creative to make it work.
I think another great example of growth hacking in this instance is whenever companies are willing to cannibalize their current business model. So many companies die because they're not willing to change their business model. You've seen it happen to a lot of publishers and media companies who don't change quickly enough. And then you look at a company like Apple who introduces the iPhone only to cannibalize its most popular product, the iPod. And then it introduces the iPad to cannibalize computers, which it was winning in. And now they're talking about introducing an iWatch to cannibalize who knows what, potentially the phone, right? So they do a great job. And something we've been doing with a lot of publishers is introducing this idea of social publishing to address the fact that traditional publishers can't make money on mobile, right? They're getting 50% of their traffic from mobile users and only around 10% of their ad revenue max. So there's a huge disproportionate problem there. And what we've been teaching them to do is build out their social presence, which is fundamentally mobile, right? Your Facebook and Twitter users are mobile. And if you can build that out and you can get a huge number of engagements and impressions and followers, and then you can create content that advertisers pay for, native content, very similar to a BuzzFeed or a Refinery 29, which is that exact model, right? You don't have to worry about ads on mobile because you're not serving them. You're making content, and that's how you guys get paid, and that's how I think the future of publishing is going to have to go. Now, can a New York Times do that? No, because first of all, their business model is to be objective and to serve ads on the side of a page. That's how they're built. But if they don't try something new, they're going to continue to decrease their revenue over and over and over again and change back to subscription model, away from subscription model, back to subscription model, back to ad model, until there is no model, right? Until someone else has just built a Facebook page that shares all the news that the New York Times typically shares, and they're getting paid by Intel just because they happen to cover Intel objectively. And sure, it's murky waters, but have to be willing to change.
Yeah, for me, the most interesting examples for growth hacking are really more on the structural and sort of ownership side of things. You know, we talk a lot about content creation, deployment, and a lot of the ability to be successful from a social perspective, encompassing the paid media component too, is decreasing the time between and the teams that also own, again, content creation and the promotion side, right? So traditionally paid media has been owned by the paid media agencies, and we're starting to see some things change around there, where many times now the PR side or the communication side of the team or the agency has ownership of not only the creation process, but also the promotion process, right? New entities like Weber Shandwick's Media Co. are really interesting, right? Because they're starting to say, all right, there's a new process here. There's a new structure that's required to be successful. How do we iterate and create new entities or new agents, right, to solve that more complex problem?
That's such an important topic right now, and that's what's preventing so many brands from growth hacking, is the fact that they're owned, they're earned, and they're paid are in completely different agencies, right? So whoever's creating the content for Facebook is giving it to a social media agency who has a community manager who then posts it, who then sees what's happening, who then has to deal with the paid media agency who just sets one ad to run for the entire month instead of targeting it based on who's looking at it or who's seeing it or who's using something like Shoutlet to automatically do that, right? You can't do them all separately. We really can call ourselves a converged media agency, right? Because we create the content, we distribute it using earned media with PR and influencers, and then we do native ads. And I can't imagine how anyone but a community manager could be the one who's targeting the content to the various people. How could someone who's in a paid agency do that? And I think that's why you saw during the Boston Marathon bombings some big companies, one or two that have been named already by people here, so I'll let them go. But Fortune 500 companies had paid promoted tweets and promoted Facebook posts running throughout that because the media buying agency ran the ad at the beginning of the month and just left it up. So they had sponsored stories and sponsored posts running, and that's just a disaster, right? Because you have people who are trying to use Twitter to find out where their loved ones are, to find out where their families are, and get information about what's going on, and 1/5 of their screen, 1 out of every 5 tweets was taken up by a promoted tweet trying to get you to attend a festival sponsored by a liquor company at Tribeca. And that's the opposite of growth hacking, right? That's moving very, very slowly and not changing at all.
That's die hacking, I think. But anyway, yes, Nikhil.
Yeah, no, and that leads to, I think, one of the more important questions for me, and something that, I struggle with too, is, we mentioned sort of, one of the big sort of, amplifiers of growth hacking is this sort of constriction or, lack of resources, right, as a startup, right? You don't have more than $1 million to spend or whatever the case might be, even though that, is a lot. How do you enact sort of that growth hacking change in an environment that has potentially infinite resources?
Well, isn't no money kind of freedom? Well, none of you will agree with that statement, but
it's lack of maybe responsibility, right?
Well, I mean, but no money means you have to think of something really really interesting and maybe a little crazy. And, I mean, I don't think what you guys did with the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, which is awesome, by the way, that wasn't, I mean, you didn't do anything crazy, but you had to think a different thought. And so, if you're dealing with a brand that's got like a $40 million ad budget, like, what do they just say? What do we care? We're just going to throw money at the problem.
Yeah, and I think that we'll throw money at the process. I think that's what a little bit of the point is, that marketers, have this desire to process things. And what's the formula? What do I need? And you work on these long, 12-month, 18-month timelines for the next initiative, the next product launch. And I think that can lead to some real challenges of getting there. It forces you down a path. It forces you down what did we do last year? Okay, we'll take 2% and experiment and not do anything else. I think that you just got to, every piece of process is the enemy. Any organization that says that's the way we've always done it is destined to fail. I don't care if it's a high school or a billion-dollar brand. And so knowing that if you're going to go down the process road with hiring different silos or dividing budget on certain percentages, you're at a real risk in this economy.
There's just two quick thoughts. The one is there's sort of like an accidental growth hacking happening in the space, in that any big brand, if you speak to someone who has an EVP global social media title, you know that they've got about 13 cents in their pocket, right? Literally, it's sort of an epidemic.
Actual metric.
No, truly, it's everyone has a book and no budget.
And they probably haven't really ever used social media in their lives.
Yeah, so that's a lot of these conversations are, we're going to spend $500 million in media this year. I've got $50,000 for a test, and it's a big chunk of my budget, right? So you do get sort of accidental growth hacking, and that plays to our favor because our technology will work quite well. I wanted to come back to your point about sort of silos, and the one thing that always surprises me about big brands is they'll talk about sort of discipline silos. Well, our disciplines are siloed. And the truth is the vast majority of Fortune 500 brands, they have product silos followed by geographic silos, followed by discipline silos, followed by channels within discipline silos, right? And so when you talk about the idea of growth hacking and actually getting a concentrated program to work and really pay dividends, it's very difficult to overcome that. And a lot of big brands just get stuck. They've got literally 4, 5, 6 layers of silos that they can't overcome.
And you've got a lot of people who can say no, but very few that can say yes is the issue.
It's actually, this conversation is sparking some really interesting thoughts in sort of in real time. Just going back to this conversation, also this point about silos, and I think the problem with sort of integration, right? And in our, just because it's our world, when I look at traditional publishers, you have a salesperson, you have an audience development person, you have an editor, and they don't actually speak the same language, right? The salesperson is like, hey, I need more traffic. The audience development person says, I don't have any budget. And the editor will say, I can't produce more content. And each one of those pockets is actually producing or sort of seeking a different KPI, right? And so it's about breaking up those those silos and figure out how you can actually race towards one goal together, right? I think that just so often undermines the ability to actually move forcefully. But I do also want to say that I think with regards to growth hacking being a possibility even for large corporations, right? There was, I'm sure everyone reads here the Corner Office and the Sunday Times, and the second page is always so inspiring. And there was a really good interview a week ago that just basically, broke it down that, corporations who are growing by a few percentage points a year over year, are essentially acting defensively, right? And startups, we're all like racing to try to climb the biggest hill out there, right? And so just the underlying motivations and agenda are also sort of fundamentally different.
Yeah, most brands can't growth hack because they have to be defensive because they're public companies and the shareholders want to see you be defensive. They don't want you to invest in something or buy something until it's already proven and they're already going to see revenue immediately from it, right? So a big company like WPP or Omnicom doesn't buy up agencies in the social media space. There haven't been a lot of acquisitions in that space by these companies because they can't because there's not enough revenue to immediately justify it to their shareholders. They'd rather wait for companies to get from 10 or 20 million dollars in revenue to 50 or 60 million dollars in revenue and pay a much, much higher premium for it than to buy it for way, way less today and help grow it into a bigger company because shareholders would rather see that on the stock will perform better. So it's very hard to see companies ever being of that size be able to growth hack. They'll buy hack. Yahoo's version of growth hacking is buying Tumblr.
Well, I was going to say, can Tumblr growth hack Yahoo? That was actually a question I had. Okay, what do you guys think?
Remains to be seen. I don't know. It's going to be tough. I mean, there's not a lot of synergies between Yahoo and Tumblr, right? There's not. I mean, you'd think they are publishers, advertisers, but there's just not a lot there. I think they bought Cool and they bought Social and they bought Mobile, and they're going to figure out what to do with it and just try not to turn it into MySpace.
The amazing thing that Tumblr has going for it, though, is this sort of this visual storytelling at its core that just encourages people to play along, right? Like it's visual improv. I love that. And how about this? Oh, great. How about this? And I think that is at its core. Whether Yahoo can tap into that, I'm not sure. I mean, early signs are they want to slap some ads around it.
That's a bad sign to begin with, right? But the other thing that's kind of amazing that no one realizes is that Tumblr's not a mobile platform at all. Like people don't access it, the Tumblr app on mobile devices. It really doesn't rank high up there at all. People use Facebook all the time on mobile. They use the app. They use Instagram all the time on mobile. And Tumblr doesn't rank high up there. I think people publish content to Tumblr and then it gets shared out to Twitter, which is the true real-time content discovery engine, right? And then they click on the link and they go directly to the page. They don't spend time in that dashboard, in that feed, so then they can't be served ads. There's no paid product for those people. I don't know if Yahoo realizes that.
Well,
I would hope they do.
so
They
you're
spend a
saying
lot of
Yahoo should buy Twitter and then the Tumblr, and then it'll all be like synergistic.
It would have made a lot of sense for Twitter to buy Tumblr because they both have that kind of real-time content being created through feeds. But
Oh, well, it's too late now. I'm very sorry.
Yumblr.
Yeah, right. Very sorry.
They should also buy Social Chorus. Just want to throw that out.
Right. Yeah.
For me, it's more structural than anything else. I mean, as long as Tumblr remains a separate business unit, I think it'll continue to thrive. I think the moment you try and integrate, just going back to the silos and things like that, that's where you'll run into, issues of preventing innovation and things like that, unless the overall structure gets redefined. I mean, there's this great notion that everybody knows that, two, agency groups or media buying teams that sit next to each other and never talk to each other, right? Why is that the case? This is a structural issue.
But I think that's where we get back to this problem of defensive public companies. For how long can Yahoo let Tumblr, which it just paid $1 billion for, be on its own and make $5 million a year? They're going to have a lot of questions to answer, right? I agree. Tumblr is awesome by itself, and it's a cool platform. How long can Yahoo let them just continue doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like they meddle with it and then they screw it up. So what was the point? I mean, that was a little bitter or something. I don't know. So anyway, well, is there any kind of guideline that you have for like who the go-to person is within an organization? I mean, it's not always going to be the person with the same title. It's not always going to be the CMO. I mean, are there attributes you can look for? Like, this is the person who can get this done for me inside this organization, or who can knock the appropriate heads together, if you will?
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I think you got to, if you can focus on the new brands, the brands that haven't existed very long. I mean, we talked about Chobani. They're doing some of the most innovative digital marketing out there because they haven't written the rule book. When you have growth allows you to do a lot of the experimentation and try things, and you work on your gut. That's the Red Bull story. Red Bull, we did some work with them in our agency. They don't have strategy meetings. A couple years ago, their new North America president came in and said, just stop the strategy meetings. You guys, we all hired you because you understand the brand. Go do what you think is right. So that's the kind of motivation that you see when you can find the young companies that are coming up where they're attracting the talent. They've got people who came in, remember when it was 3 people, before it got to 300 or 3,000. I think that's where you're going to see the most passion for getting ahead of the game.
Yeah, for me, again, it kind of goes in. I'm not sure exactly how you identify this, but it's about risk assessment, right? And finding people that are willing to take that risk, right? Whether, again, it's in an environment like Red Bull where it's structurally okay to do whatever you think is right, versus, again, people that say, hey, I can put my job on the line, or whatever the case might be, in more older school organizations and absorb that risk. Those are the people that are most likely to, incite change. And a lot of this too, and it was funny, the last panel up here is, growth hacking is very similar to change management in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, should we even talk about like trying to growth hack a big corporation, a huge one, or is that like an oxymoron? Jason, you're shaking your head. What does it mean?
Just the idea of that makes me like nauseous, dealing with
What?
that. Dealing with a big corporation like that and trying to get them to move fast is just like bang your head into a wall over and over and over again. I mean, that's my experience.
Because I just find it amusing that I asked the question, how do you do it in a big organization? And the answer is, go to the new innovative organization. So just avoid the question. So, but it also sounds like a lot of what you deal with are dealing with the more traditional agencies, which is, one step further removed than the actual client. So I'm kind of interested in how you deal with that.
Well, we're a non-traditional agency, and we don't deal with agencies, so I can't answer that one. But we work with a lot of with these guys all the time.
I think it's been, again, it is one or more steps removed, but I think this is a time that the agencies are looking for help. If you're in an innovative area and you have a solution that's not taking bread off their table, there's a huge opportunity. They're pulling in companies that are helping their clients solve the future. I mean, clients have never, I think, relied on their agencies more than in the past, say in the past 10 or 20 years. Because the world is changing so much, they're putting a lot of that on their table, and the agencies need help. I mean, they're understaffed, underpaid, so I think there is an opportunity to kind of win together.
And I think you have to. A lot of people take the opinion like, oh, wait, agencies are going out of business. I don't think they're going out of business. Big marketers are overwhelmed with the options, technology, the number of channels, you name it. And the agencies do play an important role. I think the best agencies sort of embrace technology, and whether they actually want to manage the technology remains to be seen. But they embrace the process and play along in a way that doesn't dumb the whole process down. So those are the best agencies to work with.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, the environment is changing so fast, right? And that ultimately is this, macro condition that's kind of causing this massive seismic shift on the status quo, and the agency has to react to that, right? And that incentivization allows, them to seek out these type of opportunities whereas, even if they existed, maybe there would be no incentive.
So is it time for questions, Ken? My shot clock was not working up here for a long time. So do we have any questions? Okay. Well, we got the guy back there. Okay, well, anyway, I'll just ask one more question. We'll see if anybody has one. But what's the most radical thing that you guys have done in the name of growth, or gotten a company to do? I mean, you guys all get to, when you're on your own, I'm sure you're just crazy as all hell, but, when you have to convince a company to do something.
But even when I think, even as you move along your own trajectory as a company and a startup, and you've gone through multiple rounds of financing maybe, and you're that much bigger, growth hacking, all of a sudden you yourself start to realize that the implications are actually different. And when you make really important product decisions, for example, where you're investing lots and lots of money and the outcome isn't entirely clear, but you're doing something that's totally revolutionary, at least that you believe will be revolutionary for yourself, for the way you service brands, that's where you need to consistently remind your organization, yourself, in the virtue of growth hacking, right? And so, so for us, we've been for ourselves actually investing in a technology infrastructure that I think will change the way publishing happens for traditional publishers. A semantic knowledge database that's taken months and months and months to develop and lots of money. And those are the types of initiatives as an organization comes around for yourself, you need to be like, I believe in that because I believe that'll change business for us and for brands that work with us.
I think for us, without naming a specific client, the biggest hurdle is always when a client lets go, right? Actually turns over control to what's going to happen in the social space with their advocates, with the people who are going to pick up the content and do with it as they will, right?
Do they take the lawyer and tie him up and throw him in a closet? How do they do that?
I mean, you almost have to, right? And it's funny, a lot of brands are starting to, you have the negotiation around the contract completely separate from what's going to happen later. They just want to get it out of the way and cover those bases. But you do have to recognize, you have to set it free and see what's going to happen and then start to play. And real relationships require a significant time commitment, right? There are very few technologies out there that I've seen where you flip on the switch and it just works and gets better without you doing anything. And the brands that both let go on one hand and then join the conversation and actually learn and use the data to improve it actively do well.
They might need a support group or something, brands who need to let go, Sort of like parents letting go of their kids. Okay, do we have any questions? Okay, the gentleman in the front. Hold on, I got another mic for you here. Oh, no, they're coming. He's coming for you.
State your name and company.
Okay, great. James Lee, I work for investment firm COSA. As you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs in general, especially they're creating new apps that's engaging the user. Obviously, they're connecting to social media platform like Facebook to immediately ramping up the scale and usage. Does it make sense for these guys to continue to focus on user experience and maybe using Facebook's backend as their plumbing for data, for consumer insight, and just outsource that part of advertising monetization for Facebook? Wouldn't that make their life a little bit easier? Do you see that trend going forward, like Facebook and Google become the plumbing and data for consumer insight and analytics and measurement for a lot of startups in general? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I guess the worry again is, and if you've seen, like Social Cam, I think it was, that went from huge boost in total DAUs and MAUs and then just crashed immediately after that. I mean, I think the worry and the flip side to what you're saying is, just getting consumed in the ad metrics and the acquisition metrics and forgetting about things like, again, lifetime value and total value. And again, going back to the growth hacking conversation here, I think it's more about understanding the final top ideal business objective and forgetting about all the paths that lead there and just aiming straight for that main goal, right?
So anyone else? Yeah, Jason?
I was going to say, you have to create an awesome app with a great user experience, and you have to have a really good advertising and marketing plan and a good data and analytics approach as well. So I don't think you can put one ahead of the other, but using those platforms, not being afraid that they own the data, is inevitable, and I think that is the right way for them to go.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, that's it, panelists. You're off now. Give them a big round of applause. It's hard to be the last panel. So you guys can go. I have to wrap up here. So I'll just get out my broom and mop the stage. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. I hope you got a lot out of it, and wanted to thank all of our sponsors: Loud Door, Expo, Add This, Ad Parlor, Shoutlet, and Unmetric. And thanks. And we have 3 other shows going on this week. So I'll see you tomorrow at video. And then, do you have something to say, John?
I do. I want to thank Kathy Taylor for a wonderful program. Give it up for Kathy Taylor.
Thank you, darling.